Well, guys, the Boston bombing saga continues to unfold. Yes, even after Dzhokhar Tsarnaev was apprehended in a wild showdown, the corporate media hasn't stopped airing around-the-clock coverage. Of course, the latest, despite his injuries, is that Dzhokhar is conscious and mentally stable enough to understand and respond to interrogation. According to anonymous officials, in a recent line of questioning, Dzhokhar acknowledged his role in the attack, allegedly telling interrogators that the U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are what motivated him and his brother to carry it out. And although the latest news fills in some of the gaping holes, there are still many unanswered questions about what really happened and why. With so little transparency, we can only speculate to begin to fill in the blanks. So, with the story being covered 24/7 in the news, why is there so little follow-up on the missing details? To help me gain some insight on that and the media landscape as a whole, earlier I spoke with Mickey Huff, Director of Project Censored and History Professor at Diablo Valley College. I first asked Mickey about the questions I still have, like who were the men arrested on video? What exactly happened that night with the MIT officer? And where is the video of the brothers dropping off the bomb? And then I asked him why the corporate media doesn't follow up with the public or the police to find out those important details. And here's what he had to say.
Well, Abby, as you well know, the details aren't necessarily important in the news reporting. In fact, the more details that are reported, what an audience will discover is that there's just a lot of contradiction. There have been multiple stories about what happened to the older brother. There was another person that was allegedly detained, and then it turned out that it might have been the older brother. Then there's reports that he was shot. Then there's reports that the younger brother ran him over. Then there's reports that he was strip searched and died in custody. I mean, these are all reports that have come out on the corporate media. So anybody that's actually been paying attention to the corporate media ought to be somewhat confused if they're taking notes. But as we know, the phrase, the devil's in the details, what emerges is, again, a real series of problems for corporate media. CNN has been particularly bad. I mean, I guess they've all been bad. You've also seen at Fox and other places them declaring that they know the motives and they know exactly it's an international jihad and so forth. Andrew Sullivan spewing such nonsense, among others. But the reality is that, you know, we really don't know very much. And the recent reports, of course, about the younger brother in the hospital recovering, if they're apparently releasing statements from him while he's being drugged and gosh knows what else, I mean, how much can one gather from this information?
Right. I'm interested also, are they authorized to tell us what the brother's saying on the hospital bed? I mean, I think that that's strange in itself. I mean, isn't this a criminal case that we maybe shouldn't be knowing offhand immediately what he's saying as he's waking up from a drug-induced unconscious state? But as we know, the coverage on this has been complete overkill, total. Why is this incident specifically being zeroed in on when thousands of people are dying every day from guns, gang violence across the country? Why isn't every murderer treated this way, Mickey?
Well, it doesn't fit the xenophobic narrative, and it doesn't fit the narrative of the war on terror when we look at what happens in Columbine or Sandy Hook or Tucson. You know, and Glenn Greenwald, of course, wrote a great piece about this, calling attention to these gross double standards. I mentioned this last week on Monday when I said, you know, why is it that people don't seem to care or why doesn't the media give this kind of attention to the 30 people that die in an Iraqi public square bombing? I mean, this kind of stuff has been going on in Afghanistan and Iraq at the hands of the U.S. or provoked by U.S. occupation for over a decade, and it just doesn't garner the same headlines. So when it happens here, we see that when it's the white folks terrorizing others, it's a criminal act, it's an aberration, they're crazy, schizo, etc. But when it's people that are darker skinned and may have some connections to other terror groups or jihadi groups or whatever the buzzword groups would be, the media goes ballistic and it gets rabid about this, and they play it up for ratings, as you well know. But the facts don't underlie this kind of coverage. I mean, people have a far more likelihood of dying by drowning in their bathtub or in an accident in their own house, statistically speaking. And we're not declaring war on personal hygiene. I mean, it rises to the level of such ridiculousness that, you know, we really do have to kind of stand back in awe and watch people in Boston cheer on a militarized police state. There are serious ulterior motives to both the coverage and what happened in Boston, and it's far too early to know exactly what happened, but you can't really tell that to the corporate media.
Right. Well, they drive on fear. They depend on fear. And of course, you know, having this military police state crackdown on the entire city and people cheering it, applauding it. I mean, there are even people here in D.C. at the memorials cheering with American flags. I mean, it's just unbelievable. It makes me very scared if something bigger happens here, Mickey. And of course, like you said, the browner someone is, the less people care about whether they're blown up or not. I mean, if a bomb exploded in East Oakland, would anyone be talking about it on the corporate news? I highly doubt it. You know, and as you said again, the language being used about this, the events being looked at as an act of terrorism, yet Aurora, Sandy Hook, Tucson, Columbine aren't. Why is it only considered terrorism when it's an Arab or Muslim with a bomb?
It's an interesting question, and it's one that really ought to be looked at very closely and carefully. We have had, you know, scores of bombings in the United States over the 20th century, and Davy D pointed out in an article that whenever these kind of bombings or attacks take place in black neighborhoods, or whenever an abortion clinic is bombed, you know, there's scarcely a mention of the T word. But again, whenever it fits this narrative that really, again, underlies the U.S. global hegemony and the wars in the Middle East and the saber rattling, particularly against Iran, unilateral support of Israel against Palestine. I mean, you know, these are the kind of narratives that people feed off of, and this is the kind of thing that keeps the military-industrial complex budget bloated in Keynesian militarist fashion. And again, you know, the paramilitarization that we've seen going on post 9/11, this is writ large in Boston, right? And we see people, President Obama saying that, well, we don't want to see these we don't want to see this kind of war, this war machinery in the streets, and, you know, we can't tolerate this kind of militarization in the streets, yet he's doing it here domestically. He talks about how other countries should never tolerate it, and yet here we are being in Pavlovian fashion groomed to deal with it here.
Right, and Obama's saying we will not be terrorized. Well, who's doing the terrorizing? I mean, of course, yes, the bombings are horrifying. I don't want to underplay that, but at the same time, I mean, shutting down a city with paramilitary troops, is that not terrorizing the people and instilling an insane amount of fear unnecessarily amongst the populace? I mean, the media is giving these brothers exactly what they want. If they wanted attention, well, they got it.
Yeah, they've got it in spades. And the interesting thing that's lacking from most corporate media coverage is something called evidence. There's a lot of people imputing motive and claiming they know this, that, and the other, like we mentioned with people like Andrew Sullivan. But the FBI is claiming they're not sure. And by the way, if you've been paying attention to the FBI, they've already contradicted their story 2 to 3 different times about how they didn't know these people, then they did know these people, they weren't following these people, they don't think they're connected to other people, yet they were interviewing people in other countries about it months ago. You know, it's more of the same. And part of this, by the way, is in the Project Censor 2013 book, story by Trevor Aronson. He has a new book out called The Terror Factory, and it talks about how the FBI has been behind a majority of terrorist plots that they've subsequently thwarted in the United States over the past several years. So that should be something that is highly questioned.
Well, I think that's why a lot of people are trying to fill in the blanks and trying to say, you know, I mean, a lot of unfounded speculations at this point, because there's so little transparency, so little facts have been made available, so many contradictory facts out there. And of course, CISPA passes the House while all eyes are on Boston, Mickey. Do you think that the timing of passing this really controversial bill that some saying are worse than the Patriot Act, do you think that this is coincidental?
This is hardly coincidental. Anytime some major news story is created or something happens that draws the attention of the corporate media, you can better well believe that there's a bait and switch shell game afoot and smoke and mirrors and all the rest, where then it's time to get things passed that there really isn't support to pass. If you remember the last time SOPA tried to go through, it didn't go through. There was a lot of grassroots resistance against this kind of a bill that creates cyber spying and legalizes cyber spying. The same thing with CISPA, but it happens under the cloak of all this mayhem, just like Obama signs NDAA in the dark of New Year's Eve. You know, the other thing that's going on here, again, this is like a classic news abuse story where there's so much hysteria and speculation about Boston that we don't pay attention to anything else that's going on. You know, another thing that's going on, by the way, same time is in the state of Texas, there's a state bill and a House bill designed to do the same thing that happened in New Mexico, which is to basically take off the rolls classes like Mexican-American history, African-American history, so that they're not taught in ways that are allowed to add those units to a history transfer or a history degree. So they're essentially taking away the credit for teaching these types of histories and these untold histories in the United States. That's also happening right now while all this mayhem is going on.
Unbelievable, Mickey. And of course, your organization, Project Censored, which you're the director of, one of the largest research organizations in the country, uncovers the top censored stories every year. Can you give us a really quick sneak peek on some of the stories for next year's book? We have about a minute left.
Yeah, I can give you a quick list, and it really ties into a lot of what we've been talking about, Abby. Obama's war on whistleblowers, journalism under attack around the globe, increasing number of journalists being killed around the globe. We've got a triumvirate of great stories going on about Iceland, the peaceful revolution there, their initiative on modern media. They have a modern media initiative there that is acting to protect press freedom and protect the right of reporters to tell the truth about what's going on in society. So we have several stories on those types of themes that are coming up here in the next Project Censored book that I'm putting together right now with Andy Lee Roth.
And I encourage everyone who's in school or outside of school who's interested in investigative journalism to get involved with Project Censored. It's truly an excellent initiative. Thank you so much, Mickey Huff, Director, Project Censored, History Professor at Diablo Valley College. Appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Abby. Thanks for breaking the set.